What we do here is go back.
Over the course of the last couple of weeks, I've been trying to answer that question. You know, if Project 8 stands the test of time. The answer is not as straightforward as previous Tony Hawk installments. Putting it bluntly, Project 8 is just different. Released on November 7th, 2006, Tony Hawk's Project 8 is, as the name would imply, the 8th game in the series. Developed by Neversoft and published by Activision, released for the PS2, Xbox, Xbox 360, PS3, and PSP, let's take a look at just exactly what happened here. I'm just gonna act like Bob and build a little bit here. Historically, in the Tony Hawk series, up until this point, we've had games that follow a linear path to some degree with a fun or at least interesting story to accompany that. Even American Wasteland, with its wide open world, had a linear progression system. Characters in these games all had an abundance of personality, these games were well optimized, the soundtracks were memorable, earning sponsorships felt sacred and something to work towards. These games were fun and these games were classics. Tony Hawk's Project 8 is absolutely none of this.
What we do here is go back.
Where do I begin with this one? Well, our journey begins here in Suburbia, an uninspired cul-de-sac-style neighborhood that sort of sets the tone for the rest of the game, but we'll get more into the map and areas within it later on. It's right off the bat that I could tell we weren't playing Underground 1, Underground 2, American Wasteland, or any game in vain to any of those. There's more than one tell here, but the first may not be something that jumps out to you as the viewer. Project 8 introduced more realistic physics that make the game feel sluggish right off the jump. Maybe not sluggish for a generic skateboarding game, but sluggish for something that has Tony Hawk's name attached to it. Instead of ripping around at lightning speed for the majority of the game like we're used to in a Tony Hawk game, Project 8 is just slower paced. Overall combos still exist, you're still hitting those ridiculous multipliers, which is a good thing, it's a little familiarity, but you'll find that stacking different manuals or lip tricks just to stack that multiplier is going to take more time. The tricks, the animations, it all just takes more time. Overall, having physics reworked the way it has been does sort of shoot an arrow right in the knee of a Tony Hawk game's soul. Like I said, as a generic skateboarding game it would work, as a Tony Hawk game it really doesn't. The optimization for this game, or lack thereof, is pretty poor. I played on the Xbox 360 and my experience, along with others that I've read online, was not great. Apparently stuttering and performance issues, they're all just par for the course on certain platforms with this one. It's unfortunate they couldn't have taken a little more time to optimize Project 8. I think at bare minimum I could have had a better time with a smoother game, that probably goes without saying. The gameplay is sluggish, but truthfully it's not horrible. If you've played a Tony Hawk game before, you'll be able to pick up on all the mechanics, flip tricks, grabs, manuals, grinding, the Nada spins, getting off your board, it's all here, and if you've done it before, you won't have any issues. The only thing that is substantially different in Project 8 is the new Nail a Trick feature. This is done by clicking in both analog sticks on the controller simultaneously. At this point, time slows down and the camera shifts to a close-up of your skateboarder. In this state, you use the right analog stick to flick your right foot and the left analog stick to flick your left foot. It's definitely a unique mechanic and it works for a skateboarding game. It just feels weird playing a Tony Hawk game with something like this in it. Personally, I do like the mechanic, but I feel like it's underutilized throughout. It's a game changer. I feel like they could have done a little more with it aside from just pasting nails in random places throughout the map where you have a specific nail a trick goal to complete. Instead of racking up money to purchase goods by completing goals, this time around you rack up tokens by getting other people stoked. You just have to skate around impressing the locals with your tricks and you rack up tokens. You go to the skate shop and basically pay through the amount of people you've impressed. This is somehow a depleting resource, so once you've spent your impressions at the skate shop, you've got to earn more, just as if it were money. Throughout the game, character interactions feel kinda lifeless. For example, in previous Tony Hawk titles, your character interacted with the character who was speaking. Your character would sometimes speak back, and it just felt like it was more of a personal exchange, whereas in Project 8, it's sort of just a cutscene of the character speaking directly to us as the player, and it just seems a little lazy. I feel like this is a fair criticism, as the other titles had such great stories, largely with help from the cast in the stories. Underground wouldn't have been Underground without Eric. Underground 2 wouldn't have been Underground 2 without Bam Margera. American Wasteland wouldn't have been American Wasteland without Mindy. But Project 8 doesn't have a defining character at all. Your character isn't even a character, they're just just a soulless shell that you control as you aimlessly float through the ranks. The story and objectives in Tony Hawk's Project 8 lack the inspiration that characterized earlier installments of the series. In previous games, players advanced through a well-structured linear story that felt both rewarding and engaging. The goals in these games were typically creative and seamlessly integrated into the context of each level, making the gameplay feel fresh and immersive. In stark contrast, Project 8's progression system feels disappointingly generic, centering around the monotonous task of climbing the ranks from skater rank number 200 to number 1. This ranking system is not only repetitive, but also strips the game of any meaningful story or character development. Underground had us playing as our created character from the neighborhood chasing that sponsorship. Underground 2 had us playing as that same character in essence and experiencing a Wild Boys or Jackass style story. American Wasteland had us playing as someone who had to get out of their hometown, so they moved to LA and started new. Project 8 has us playing as somebody ranking up from number 200 to number 1. It just isn't engaging as the other games. The process of unlocking new areas on the map, formerly levels, was once a thrilling aspect in past games, which now is just kinda undermined. I'll be real, the Fun Park, which is an area you unlock toward the end of the game, was pretty fun. All in all though, Project 8 fails to capture the essence of what made the Tony Hawk series so beloved, resulting in a game that kinda feels hollow and unremarkable. Honestly, this doesn't even feel like a Tony Hawk game. It feels like a generic skateboarding game with the Tony Hawk name hastily slapped on for brand recognition. Tony Hawk's in the game, he's a recurring character in the story, and it still doesn't feel like a Tony Hawk game. The distinct personality and charm that define the earlier titles are glaringly absent, leaving Project 8 with an identity crisis. It's a shame too, this is the point where the franchise truly took a turn for the worse. The downfall began right here, with Neversoft seemingly losing sight of what made the series special in the first place. This game feels like a hollow shell of its predecessors, devoid of the passion and creativity that once drove the franchise. In the past, Tony Hawk games were known for their meticulously crafted storylines, quirky humor, and memorable characters. You weren't just skateboarding, you were embarking on an adventure, and your skateboard was just the vehicle to get you through it. Project 8, however, strips away all that richness, reducing the experience to a series of uninspired tasks that feel disconnected from any larger narrative. Neversoft's lack of attention to detail is evident in every aspect of this game, from the bland character interactions to the boring repetitive goals. It's as if the developers treated the game as just another installment to churn out rather than an opportunity to innovate or evolve the franchise. And you may be saying to yourself, well, the Nail a Trick feature is pretty innovative for a Tony Hawk game. It is, but A, they didn't utilize it enough, and B, it doesn't feel like a Tony Hawk game with it in. The overall result is a game that lacks soul, a title that fails to resonate with fans who grew up loving the series. It's not just that Project 8 is a misstep, it's a pivotal moment where the Tony Hawk franchise as a whole began to lose that sense of what it was. The lack of time, love, and effort invested in crafting a meaningful experience is painfully obvious, and it's no surprise that this game marked the beginning of the end. The spirit of Tony Hawk, the very essence that made these games more than just mere skateboarding simulations, that little something that gave it character feels absent, leaving behind a product that, while functional, is ultimately forgettable. Reflecting on this, it's clear that Tony Hawk's Project 8 is a lesson in what happens when a developer and franchise lose their connection to the audience and their original vision. The magic that once made Tony Hawk games a must-play for millions was no longer there, and with it, the franchise's golden era came to an end.